Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining this webinar. Hopefully, you've managed to open it all okay and had no problems. We're going to get going in a minute or so, but in the meantime, if you can just introduce yourself in the chat, perhaps your name and your role in education, just so we get to know you, and then we'll get going in just a second. Excellent. Thank you to everybody that responded in the chat. Lovely to see where people are from and the unique roles that you all hold in education. But more importantly, thank you for joining this webinar. We're very aware that there's a lot going on at the moment and everybody's very busy with the kind of unique situation that we're in at the moment. So thank you again for joining us. Just as a kind of way of introduction, my name is Graham McCauley and I'm the Director of Technology for Learning at the Leo Academy Trust. And with me, I've got Rachel.
Hi, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Rachel. As I said, absolutely thank you from the bottom of our hearts, not only for joining us today, but also everything you're doing to support all of the learners in your schools. It's a very unique time at the moment, and it's requiring a wide variety of skills that I think a lot of educators, myself included, haven't necessarily used. So, thank you for everything. So just going to give you a bit of an overview of hopefully what we're going to cover in the next hour or so. I'm going to provide you with a bit of an overview of the Leo Academy Trust, a bit of our background and our story and the journey, including some of the ups and obviously some of the downs. Clearly, as I just said, we had some challenges along the way. So we're going to outline some of those challenges that we overcame pre-COVID-19 and then how that kind of led us into making the shift from traditional teaching to remote teaching. And more importantly, I think what we'd really like to do is give everybody some really simple, easy to use examples that perhaps you can take away to use in your own schools and colleges. And finally, we'll finish just with some kind of signposting to useful websites, resources, or kind of thinking activities that might be able to help you on your journey. So apologies for anyone that's heard me speak before. You've probably seen something very similar to this before. But just to say that we're a relatively small multi-academy trust. We've got 6 academies spread across 7 sites with just over 3,500 pupils. And obviously, more importantly than that, 450 passionate staff that are helping to deliver great teaching and learning to all of those pupils. I guess what's really crucial to say is that we spent a lot of time forming our digital strategy across the trust, and it's taken us a lot of time to get to this point, but we're in a really fortunate position where we have got one approach for everybody moving forward. And I think it's fair to say that this has been a long process. So please, when you hear about some of the journey and some of the challenges, this hasn't happened in the last 6 weeks. This isn't a COVID-19 response. It's our response to delivering great teaching and learning for all pupils all the time. So please don't think that this has happened overnight. So what was life like in our schools, and what were some of the challenges we were facing? I guess we were very similar to every school and college and university and probably public sector organisation up and down the country, that there were challenges that we had to really think strategically about how we were going to overcome. So, of course, like with anything, we had concerns about funding, and there were issues around reduced school funding for our schools. Yet equally, there was also a drive to develop teaching and learning across all of our schools, and so we are very aware that our solution to provide the best quality teaching had to be within the constraints of the budgets. When we started to look at strategy and started to think about actually how can we kind of think differently about technology, we were actually at the point where GDPR was on the horizon. And I think we're kind of reflecting on this. Sorry, I don't know if I just lost my slides. Bear with me. Okay, so sorry, Rachel's just coming back with the slides. Any second now, apologies. She'll be here in just a second. And then we'll carry on talking about our challenges. Poor Rachel's got builders outside her window at the moment, so it may be where there was kind of jackhammering just as we were talking. So bless her, she's responded to that really quickly. Bear with me just 1 second. Let me just share my slides in case she's having problems with her. Bear with me. I'll just share the slides again, and then I'm sure. Okay, I'll just let the slides catch up. Won't be a second. Okay. Oh. Okay, excellent. Right, we're back to slides. There we go. Fantastic. Okay, brilliant. So sorry about that. I don't know quite what happened there, but we'll carry on as if nothing happened. So where were we? So we were saying, yeah, we had some of these financial constraints, and that was some problems. At the same time as that, GDPR was coming in and was a concern for us. And I think if we reflect on that, we'd probably say that there was quite a lot of concerns and scaremongering centered around GDPR. And I think whatever we needed to have in place had to kind of respond to that. In addition to that, the local authority IT support was kind of removing their central administration service. So we had that additional challenges of the infrastructure was changing and what were we going to do about that. But more importantly than any of that, was that we had staff that wanted to collaborate, wanted to work across sites and wanted to support each other. And unfortunately, our systems and our processes didn't allow us to do that, and therefore didn't allow us to do top high quality teaching across multiple sites in a collaborative sense. So that was really important for us as an organisation to think about how can we pull staff together and to get staff working collaboratively. And I guess underpinning all of that was we didn't have any direction. There was no strategy or vision. Our approach generally was centered around the technology rather than the learning. We focused on responding to kind of technical problems rather than actually what does that mean for Joe Bloggs in a class. And so really we had to think really differently and creatively about how we were going to respond to the challenge. Okay, and of course there are two options, aren't there? So one of the options was let's innovate, let's think differently, let's review where we are, let's think about teaching and learning, let's think about what that looks like for a pupil and therefore how we deliver it. That was one option. Or alternatively, the option was we kind of carry on with what we've been doing for quite a long time, which is centered around kind of continuing where we were, making decisions based on the technology and the IT rather than the learning, possibly replaced with a like-for-like type model, and kind of just continue as is with kind of fixing stuff along the way. Of course, it's difficult, isn't it? And I think everybody on this call is probably on this call because you realize that innovation is hard. It takes time. It's costly, or it can be costly. And actually, any sort of digital change is difficult. And I think, you know, don't be hesitant to think that actually your staff are really important to you, as are your pupils. And actually, that's really fundamentally at the heart of it, is how do you support teachers, staff, and pupils? Polyfillering approach, i.e. kind of doing a quick short-term solution, is often quite favourable. It's often cheaper if there's any cost at all. There's relatively low level of change. Often you can do the kind of infrastructure and the technical stuff really simply, and pupils, as far as they're concerned, often don't know about any of that. And I think when we look at COVID-19 and our response to that, I think a lot of schools are making these kind of quick, short-term decisions. And of course, we're in a very unique position, and clearly there's a massive need for that. And of course, we're not for any stretch of the imagination suggesting that schools shouldn't do some of those short, quick implementations. But I guess my advice to you is yes, do them, but also be mindful of the long-term strategy. Okay, so if it is a Google solution, if it is a Microsoft solution, if it is an Apple solution, or any other platform or product, by all means implement the best technology to support teaching and learning, but be mindful of what that will look like when schools return. How will teaching and learning change? Because what you want to be doing is making sure that everything you're doing is having the longest impact, kind of impact possible. So, you know, yes, please make those kind of short decisions. Think, right, what platform can we use and set up by next week to get children engaged in distance learning, remote learning? But more importantly than that, how is that going to support us long term? So I just wanted to go through some of the strategic drivers for us, and I hope that these will probably be fairly similar to some of the kind of requirements that you need in your schools and colleges. Fundamentally, at the heart of it, number one, whatever we adopted, whatever technology, website, etc. we use, had to be ease of use for our pupils. Our pupils had to be able to access it. Teaching and learning is teaching and learning, not necessarily 100% about digital skills. Digital skills is clearly important, but we didn't want digital to be a blocker to teaching and learning. It needed to help us to engage and develop. And as we move on, we'll learn more and more about how that's impacted on our practice. Again, cost, we had to have a financially sustainable model. That didn't necessarily mean the cheapest cost up front. It meant the cheapest and the best value for money in the long term. So we realized that we went on a one-to-one program, not talking massively about that today, but our one-to-one program had to be financially sustainable for the future. So that was really important to us. Clearly, there is an aspect of technical support, and that needed to be able to be provided in a robust and a timely manner. But fundamentally, actually, in some ways, we didn't want that. We want the technology to work. And whilst we need that technical support to help us to drive these changes, we wanted it to be predominantly reliable and suitable. And finally, it had to be flexible. So we recognise that teaching and learning is changing at the moment. There are different curriculum, different approaches to teaching and learning. Staff and teacher recruitment is a challenge. So we needed to have an IT system and an approach to teaching and learning that enabled us to be flexible for future years. And clearly, fundamentally at the heart of it, we needed to have a strategy. We needed an organisational approach to how we were going to support teaching and learning through technology. And so that was exactly what we formed. So I started to think for this presentation about what was it we did? What was the success of our programme? And perhaps, arguably, what were some of the things that weren't so successful? And so we use Google, but fundamentally at the heart of it, it's not about the Google, is it? It's about the people, and it's about the approach. And the more I thought about it, I thought that our approach would actually be a really good model for lots of kind of change management projects. And that was to say, we started off small. We didn't try and do everything overnight. We spent a lot of time before we even purchased one-to-one Chromebooks, before we even went to Google, just about working with staff and understanding their needs. And they would give us lots of feedback about pupil requirements and the challenges of teaching in the classroom. So we did start really small, and we actually started this program when I had a class and I was class-based. And I think that was really, really important, that every step of our deployment is being class-based driven. So it's been based on practitioners working with children rather than kind of procurement type driven processes, or indeed the IT kind of side of it. So we started really small. We started with some of the quick wins. We recognised that there were some challenges that we needed to overcome in order for us to kind of develop efficiencies and deliver better pupil opportunities and outcomes. As we kind of developed, staff became on board, staff were impressed, staff realised that they were saving times, and we sort of just followed their desires and their needs, really. And we kind of followed up with areas that staff were concerned about and supported with them with that. And if there are areas of inefficiencies, we worked on that. And so at every point of our kind of adoption, we were helping staff solve problems. Clearly, there were times when, unfortunately, by solving problems, you cause another problem. And you know, be mindful that that will happen. And of course, we had to do a lot of support in terms of those areas. So actually, you know, you might have 10 benefits, but actually, how do we also combat that one challenge that we formed? So, you know, be mindful of that. And I think one of the things we learned the hard way was actually we wish we preempted some of those problems earlier, so that we had a solution kind of ready to go, rather than we've recognised there's an issue, let's see what response we can put in. So that's something we've learned, and that's one tip I certainly showed you. Once we've kind of expanded it and we've moved on and we'd explored into different areas, we got to really the exciting, the most important bit, which is about influencing that pedagogical change. So we've gone through the stage of, we've got Chromebooks in front of us, we've gone through the stage of working in the cloud and all the different cloud-based resources that we provide our children with. But actually, fundamentally at the heart of it, have we changed pedagogy? Are we shifting how we're teaching and learning? And that is a really hard process. And I think we've, like any organisation, we've come up with challenges with regards this change. And there are some that perhaps we've got wrong and we haven't perhaps reflected as much as we needed to. But we are getting to the point now where we're seeing pedagogical shifts. And also, when we look at our COVID-19, hopefully this is a great example of one of those shifts that's come as a result of our long-term strategy. So just in terms of our kind of strategy, kind of pre-COVID-19, what have we seen? Within 6 weeks, we saw a reduction in photocopying. A lot of people said to me, oh, we'll save money on printing, that'll pay for the Chromebooks. Of course, be realistic about it. That's never going to happen unless you print an obscene amount. You're going to, you know, the costs aren't necessarily going to be equal. And our Chromebook project hasn't necessarily been fully funded by the savings. It's been fully funded by developing high quality teaching and learning, and that's the cost and that's the benefit. So yes, we did make some savings, of course we did, but if people sort of, you know, be mindful that the savings aren't necessarily quite as clear. Sorry, the savings won't necessarily be instant. I guess more importantly than any of that is to say that we've seen pupil engagement absolutely rocket. Traditionally, our teaching was very good, was strong, but there are always those children in that classroom that perhaps weren't necessarily engaged or weren't necessarily motivated. And I think what our technology approach has done is it's really changed that. It's given children different ways to engage. It's given children ways that they can choose how they respond to a task, and that's really helped us. And also, we've noticed that children completing home learning, homework, all of those kind of home supported tasks has massively increased. Just responding to one of the questions, how can a school do this fast? We'll just come on to that in a bit, because I think when we talk about COVID-19, we'll start to talk about kind of responses in a really snappy way. So how do we do that? There are effectively 3 steps we went through. We empowered staff, and I think that fundamentally that's at the heart of it, and that links into the question, sorry, that I've just seen about how do we do this fast. Firstly, review your CPD. Take an audit of your staff and where are they? How many staff do you have that are confident? How many do you have that are at a kind of beginner level? How many kind of champions have you got driving it? So really fundamentally at the heart of it, I think your staffing in your organisation is absolutely crucial. So I would strongly recommend any school begins by looking at the staff expertise and getting them perhaps the slightly technical skills of how do I share a document? How do I collaborate? How do I comment? How do I respond to children's marking? And what are the needs? Are those the needs? Are there different needs? So we spent a lot of time developing staff in partnership with children, getting their kind of take on what we needed to develop teaching and learning. Once we'd got staff on board, we got to the really important stage, which was about actually how are we implementing technology in our school to develop the quality of teaching and learning. And this was really putting children at the centre of our strategy and thinking about their learning, their outcomes, how is the technology helping us? And finally, we launched a one-to-one Chromebook program. Not really going to talk about one-to-one Chromebook program because this is more about kind of the COVID-19 response. But that's just to say that we were in a very, very fortunate position where a lot of our children do have access to devices, so that does help us. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about safety and security because fundamentally everything that we did had to be safe and secure, and this links really nicely into the kind of COVID-19 challenge. And that fundamentally at the heart of it is to say, whatever you do in your schools and organisations, please don't forget that the legal and the safeguarding requirements. That is perhaps that is the most important aspect when choosing devices and platforms and tools and approaches. So please be very, very mindful of that, and that needs to become your kind of forefront in decision making. So just going to very briefly talk about some of the things that we did to ensure that we protected children online as part of our strategy, and then as we go through, Rachel will share lots of examples of how we've implemented things quickly. The first is to say that we massively engaged our parents in decision making. So we asked parents for reviews on all of the tools. We asked for their consent, and indeed there's up to about 200 tools that we use in different schools in different ways. And we've asked parents to consent to our we asked parents to consent to everything that we use. There's no surprises. There's no unknown risks for the parents. Also, we engaged an external DPO service. So we use a legal firm. They help us with our GDPR compliance. So, for example, we put in our data protection impact assessments for all of the tools so that we could accurately look at the risk and decide whether this was whether these risks were mitigated by some of the solutions we put in place, or whether actually the risk was too great, and as an organisation we weren't prepared to develop that. That was really important, and I think for schools looking at COVID-19 response, please be very mindful of that. There is almost a deluge of resources out there, and there's every online cloud-based resource is offering a free subscription to schools, and of course that is absolutely fantastic. But please make sure you're following your internal procedures for your data protection impact assessments, the handling of sensitive child data, before using these. I think it's very easy to sign up without necessarily in the excitement and the kind of momentum of it all, and sometimes forget about those processes. Again, we responded very, very quickly in response to the changes as per keeping children safe in education. So we produced an annex to our safeguarding policy. We engaged some of our key stakeholders and then our trustee board, our safeguarding director, etc., just to make sure that we were still 100% providing the best quality, secure environment for all of our children, despite the challenges of some of those not necessarily being in school. As well as that, clearly parent communications is essential, and kind of thinking about how do we support parents quickly in this time of need. I think my number one win, for want of a better expression, would be about engaging that parental communication. So in the period up to lockdown, we communicated with parents regularly on a daily basis, and we made sure that they were informed of every step of our process. So be mindful of that. And often in some of the schools I've spoken to recently, I've said to them, actually, at the moment, is your priority about teaching and learning, or is your priority about well-being, keeping children and staff safe, and keeping that parental communication going? So I think that's really important. I think that's probably one of my quick wins that I would probably do first if I was in a school that hadn't necessarily responded to the distance learning challenges yet, is about what's our communications channel going to be. Likewise, we've reviewed some of our staff safeguarding procedures in terms of conduct on things like Google Hangouts or Zoom or Teams or any of those sort of tools. So we've got a clear line of reporting straight into a DSL to respond to any challenges as and when they arrive. As always, we've further tweaked our monitoring and filtering policies to ensure that, yes, we've got 3,500 pupils at home with every child that's got access to a device and internet, but how are we ensuring we're monitoring and filtering that access when they're not physically in the building? And finally, we engaged children in this. We made sure children understood what this meant, that we have a child code of conduct, we have those acceptable usage policies, but more importantly than any of that, we spent time with children talking about the risks, challenging some of these stereotypes that they might have. And I think what really helped was that I drove it from a teaching perspective. So I understand what it's like to be in a year 6 classroom or a year 5 classroom. And I think that has really helped to kind of drive the strategy, informing it based on pupils and learning, not necessarily from different perspectives. So coming back to that kind of, what's your quick win? How do you get going if you're in a place where you haven't necessarily thought about anything in terms of distance learning yet? And my advice would be, start with what you've got. If you've got iPads, use iPads. If you've got Chromebooks, use Chromebooks. If you've got Macs, sort of use them. If you've got, I don't know, Kindles, use them. If the data for your organization, and maybe it's one of the first things to do is collect that data, but if the data for your organization tells you that a lot of your parents haven't got access to the internet at home, then review that. How can you tweak that? If you haven't got one-to-one, the vast majority of schools haven't, but you've got one device per family, how are you designing your curriculum? How are you designing your learning centered around that? And I think really fundamentally at the heart of it is absolutely making use of what you've already got. If you're an LJFL school, use those resources. They're there, you pay for them, they're fantastic, use those. If you're a G Suite school, use your G Suite tenancy. If you've done all the sort of GDPR, DPIA type stuff, use that. If you're a Microsoft Teams school, use what you've got, and I think now isn't necessarily the time for making huge changes. It's about adopting what you've got and using it differently. And this is a little bit cheesy, but I generally believe this, and that's to say that actually all of what I've just said is really important, but fundamentally it's your staff that make a difference. It's your teachers, it's your TAs, it's your HLTAs, it's your principals, your heads that fundamentally change how technology is being used. So yes, focus on the technology, but that's insignificant if the staff aren't on board. So please put staff and pupils absolutely at the heart of everything you're doing, because that will be the success. So just to quote here, because I thought it's a lot about my ideas, and I thought about, well, what about one of our teachers? What are their views? So this is just a quote that we had prior to this presentation about Chromebooks. But I think fundamentally it's about technology, and the way that we've adopted technology has massively changed how children learn and how teachers teach pre-COVID-19. And that's to say that we're in a really lucky place to have this. So just a kind of some words from another teacher who's in the classroom facing these challenges on a daily basis. So what was our teaching like pre-COVID-19? It was very similar to lots of schools. We had a one-to-one Chromebook program that was on trial. We're in the process of rolling that out. We had that in one year group. As of September, we'll be doing it in the whole of Key Stage 2 across all of our schools. So we had some one-to-one Chromebooks, but fundamentally that wasn't everybody. Not everybody had a Chromebook. We weren't in that position. We still had lots of interactive whiteboards. In fact, we still do have lots of interactive whiteboards. We were using Smart Notebook as a teaching tool. We had exercise books. Children were still sticking in. It wasn't 100% cloud-based and 100% innovative. It was about providing great quality teaching and learning, and exercise books and interactive whiteboards, and all those things are really important. Having said that, we were using some creative tools. We were using Google Classroom quite extensively in year 4 and sort of reasonably well in other year groups. We had access to Adobe Creative Cloud via our LJFL subscription. So we were using that in pockets, and we were doing CPD to get staff on board and to see how they could use that in their curriculum, ensuring that they only used it where appropriate. And equally, we were using Jamboard. So Jamboard is just a Google tool, and we were using that in pockets. So what COVID-19 did is it didn't necessarily change how we taught, but it meant that some of those tools that we were using perhaps in kind of different ways suddenly became kind of not necessarily more important, but they were used more. Smart Notebook, clear, we've got a lot less children in schools at the moment, so we're using that less. So we really adopted what we'd got and kind of went from there. Okay, I'm just going to bring Rachel in now. So Rachel's going to kind of focus more on our post-COVID-19 response, or a response that we've taken to the current situation, and talks about some real kind of practical examples of that. But I'm going to remove myself from the stream. So thank you for coming, and just going to welcome Rachel in.
Hi, everyone. So I'm excited to be sort of talking about how our COVID approach has sort of shifted in the way that we deliver teaching to our pupils. So one of the things that we sort of focused on initially was just to make sure that we were able to deliver lessons, not just to our pupils within Leo Academy Trust, but also to all children around the world. And I think this is one of the great things that we've seen. And just being able to see the pupils being able to engage in their lessons. So we initially started to get flooded with lots of pictures of them working away, sharing what they were doing at home. And I think ultimately this is one of the key things that's been evident in what we do, is that the pupils' learning always comes first. And we wanted to make sure that during this time that we were still able to support them in their learning, as well as just to continue that normality for them in as many ways as possible. So we did that through uploading recorded lessons to a Google site and continuing to update the sort of range of activities and opportunities that we have available for them, just to keep that normality in there. And then what we started to see was that we had our pupils starting to respond through Google Classroom, as well as sharing through lots of the different platforms that they already knew how to use. So this meant that our pupils were using things like Adobe Spark Video to demonstrate their learning and respond to some of the tasks that the teachers have been set, as well as using things like Google Earth and incorporating maths into different areas of the school there. And as well as just using Google Sites to be able to present their learning in lots of different ways. And I think more and more now we're starting to see our pupils think creatively about how they use the technology. So initially we had our teachers using that technology. So we saw a lot of pupils sort of still going back to that exercise book, which was what we were still using a combination of. But more and more as of late, we've seen them adopting that technology, which is really fantastic to see. So one of the other key things, not just about obviously continuing to maintain that learning, was also to establish those connections between pupils, and as well as that connection between teacher and pupils as well. And allowing that video conferencing to take place really was important. So we know just how much that face-to-face connection is beneficial for our pupils to have. And we knew that from their feedback, that was the biggest thing that they were missing, is being able to see their friends, see their classmates, and also to be able to interact with their teacher as well. So this was something that we adopted quite early on. And, you know, obviously following in terms of our safeguarding that we'd put in place, but being able to have these interactions is something that we know that our pupils have absolutely loved being able to do, and it's something they always look forward to. And our teachers are getting more creative in the way that they sort of structure these and the tasks that they sort of get the children to do whilst they're on those video conferencing as well there. And I think that's really important to be able to maintain some kind of communication there as well. And one of the things that sort of came out was that whilst they were enjoying these video conferences with their classmates, one of the things that was coming across was that the children were sort of missing those opportunities where they'd be going out on trips, or, for example, going and having the school disco that was obviously had to be cancelled with school closures. So we decided to host a online disco. And what was really fantastic about this was that we had almost 500 pupils on the disco, dancing, singing around, jumping about. So it was a little bit of chaos, but ultimately it was what the children had asked for. And I think that that's so important for them to do as well. So being able to have that opportunity to see all of their friends dance along, and I think just having that sense of establishing their well-being as well. We know that having normality, having that routine, having those enjoyable opportunities, not just as they're learning as well, but incorporating fun aspects into their everyday, just to make this more meaningful as well, so that there is that consistency for families and communities, and to have that connection face-to-face as well, even if that is virtually. So one of the other things that obviously had to shift during this time is our CPD. And when we think about the way that we used to deliver traditional CPD, it was very much, staff having to sort of travel to come to a place to meet together. It was always, after a long day in the classroom at 4 o'clock, a lot of staff would walk in absolutely exhausted, not really ready to contribute, and they were always low on number. So we sort of were averaging about 7 or 8 staff. And it was really hard because obviously staff would have to come, would be, increasing the workload of what they had to do during that time. So it was all of this added sort of pressure that we were putting on staff CPD. But what we noticed was when we shifted to sort of the COVID approach and offering that opportunity for online CPD meant that staff don't have to travel, obviously, which is a huge perk, but also that option of offering varied times. So it wasn't after, it wasn't at 4 o'clock after some of our teachers that have been delivering lessons have had to then come and listen into a webinar, but offering those times, so whether that was, in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening, but also they are recorded. So this means that all of our staff can access them at any time. So, maybe in the evenings better for them and they still want to engage, they can do that, or they can engage and watch it back to go over some things that they may have missed during the session. So again, that shift of traditional CPD, which is very much focused on them having to be there at 4 o'clock and sit through an hour, and they can't go back and rewatch or learn any of that content. We've also seen a huge increase in our numbers of online CPD, and that's just absolutely blown our minds to see that number increase and to see our teachers engaging in that CPD on their own choice. So I think that's a huge benefit, and it has made us rethink the way that we will deliver traditional CPD going beyond COVID-19 as well. And I think that's really important that we continue to sort of offer varied CPD and those expectations as well. And this is just sort of to show you that we've been looking at various different platforms that we use and just delivering that CPD in lots of different ways as well. So whether that's sort of a more hands-on approach or just a sort of watch and learn webinar and discussions. So having that opportunity to collaborate whilst working remotely has been really beneficial for our staff. And then obviously one of the things as well is that whilst our pupils' well-being is so important, beyond that, we know just how important it is for our staff well-being. And we wanted to make sure that our staff continued to interact with their other staff colleagues and just to be happy and confident, so that when they were continuing to deliver these lessons, that they were able to do so because they knew that they had that support from their colleagues. So we offered opportunities for staff social events, whether that was quiz nights or, sort of afternoon tea or catch-ups. We know that one of our schools are doing a Kahoot quiz with their staff tonight. So it's just really nice to be able to see that engagement of how they're actually interacting and still maintaining those elements that you have when you're in school there. And I'm just going to take you through one of the other aspects that we did, and that was to offer and to continue to offer, I should say, our staff assemblies that we deliver for our pupils as well. And I think the importance of this was that we knew that our pupils missed going to the assemblies and seeing who was getting those awards and what celebrations were taking place. So it was a nice way to be able to engage. So I'm just going to play this just for a minute because I know you're all busy.
Morning and welcome to Cheam Common Junior Academy's weekly assembly. Now another week has passed, and first of all just want to say once again I've been completely blown away by the work that has been sent in on Twitter and on your year group learning websites. It has been really great to see everything that you've been up to. It definitely puts a smile on all of the teachers and my faces. So thank you, and please keep sending in anything that you're doing at home. It might be part of the work that's been set by the teachers on the distance learning website, but it might also be other things that you're doing at home with your families and with your siblings. It might be baking, it might be riding your bikes, it might be a game that you're playing. We'd really love to see what you're getting up to. Now we're hoping to keep in contact with you even more via our Cheam Common postcards. Now hopefully some children might be receiving these very soon. So if your teachers have been really impressed by something that you've shared with them, something that's been going on, you might be receiving a Cheam Common postcard on your doorstep to just say how fantastic we think you are. So we'll wonder who will be the first person to receive one of those. And then just to say once again that this won't be forever. I know lots of us are missing being at school. And I know it's...
So I'm just going to stop that there and move on and just talk a little bit more about sort of our main approach to COVID-19. And that was through our distance learning site. And this was where we were uploading all of our lessons, as well as putting up information for our parents and obviously the wider community around the world as well. So we're always up to date with sort of the latest news or any information. We also had a live chat on our site, which meant that parents were able to sort of ask any questions or feedback to us during that live chat service that we had available. But in terms of our lessons, we were obviously delivering a range of different subject lessons. So we covered from English, maths, Mandarin, computing. I know that there was also digital skills in there, and baking, and even read alouds. So just being able to sort of offer as many different lessons that were live streamed there and uploaded and recorded, as well as the activities, so that our children could actually then go and complete those response activities there. And having information to parents all in one location really made it useful, not only for our pupils to be able to access it, but also teachers and other schools as well. And one of the things that was really nice about that was actually seeing the stats that came through. So you'll see here that we hit 24,000 users, and within our trust, you'll have noticed that we've only got 3,550 pupils. So to see that engagement through our site was obviously fantastic. You'll see that slump, which was obviously those Easter holidays where that reduction happened, but just being able to see that not only were we obviously delivering lessons for the Leo Academy Trust pupils, but also we had a wide range of countries that were accessing these learning materials that we were delivering. And as well as obviously our distance learning site that we had with lots of information, activities and resources, but we were also continuing to share weekly newsletters from our schools. And this was very much a hub for parents with information, with news, with activities and ideas of how they could continue to keep their pupils engaged at home. And I think it's worth just sort of finishing to say that obviously this is the Cheam Common Junior story, but it's not just limited to that. It is a whole Academy Trust organisation working together to make sure this happens. And I think our stats are sort of really interesting just to look and see that in the last week, our usage of Google Classroom that we've been having for our pupils to sort of engage with the material that the teachers are delivering, as well as that sort of amount of Google Meets that we've held. And that's both between our children engaging with those and our staff as well, and just those Drive files as well there. And then we'll just bring Graham back in.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was busy listening to the stream, and you probably realised that there's a 10-second delay. So I suddenly realised that I was a little bit behind everybody else and was coming in. Just before we kind of get into questions, just wanted to say a huge thank you to everybody for coming today. I don't know if you come onto a webinar, but you're for being here. Just to say, there's our Twitter accounts. Please do reach out for any sort of quick type questions. But just wanted to share with you a few other bits and pieces. And we'll share these slides with anybody that asks for them in the chat. So first to say, we've got our own comprehensive menu of support, which is effectively EdTech related CPD that we're offering to our staff, but actually they're open across the board, as Rachel mentioned earlier. Some of those courses we sort of get up to 150, 160 people on any given course. So if you're interested in developing skills, the link's there. As we've mentioned, the DFE EdTech Demonstrator Program link is there. If you're a school or college that would like more intensive support or would like someone to kind of chat to about your ideas, please click on the link and sign up, edtech-demonstrator.ljfl.net. And also just to signpost you to the Key website that's done some great resources on digital education, setting up a platform, setting up Microsoft Teams or G Suite via the DFE platform provisioning. And so we've just put that link on there. What I'm going to do now, if okay, is just scroll through and bring in some of the questions that have come through, because I realised that we've tried to answer some of them, but some of them we didn't answer. So I'm just going to take Toby's. Hopefully you can see Toby's question on the screen now. Just to say that the site is open to everybody. We've very much of the view that yes, it was designed for our children and to help them with their distance learning. But www.distancelearning.co.uk is there for anybody. So if you're a parent and you want some kind of recorded lessons and all that sort of thing, or a teacher in another school want ideas, they're all there. Please feel free to go and open it up and put your child with a device in that website if you want to. So yes, they are open to everybody. Bear with me, I'll just get the next question. Another Toby question. How did you get teachers to agree to CPD? I think what the success for us was that we didn't force anybody. Nobody had to do CPD. But what we did is we put the offer out there, and staff kind of ran with it in different directions. So I saw Dom Trainer was on the chat earlier. I'm not sure if he still is. He provided some Adobe Spark training for us for staff that were interested in that, and we had probably 15, 20 teachers that were really interested in that. I did a Google Level 1 course, and we had 150 people on that. And I think really our mindset was actually empower people, let them make choices that will affect their practice. And of course, as that's developed, people have gone, actually, that's a really good tool that I saw Joe Bloggs using. I want to use that. And so that's kind of organically grown. So we haven't really, in a nutshell, had to sort of force anybody, or we didn't really have to get teachers to agree to it. They kind of have been part of the vision and realised that actually what we're trying to deliver is quality first teaching at all times. And these tools are there to kind of help that along the way.
I think as well, having sort of a varied menu of support, which is what we like to refer to it as, and having different apps that we sort of targeted.
Right here, which was, this is superb, children at the heart of the strategy. Did it help that you were a teacher? I would say it didn't help us. I would say it was essential. And I think driving technology from the classroom has got to be, or classroom or college situation, has got to happen and has got to be kind of key. And I think it meant that decisions were being approached from an educational or a pedagogical perspective. And it meant that when we were implementing change, our teachers, TAs, support staff, office staff were on board because they realised it was coming from people that had an expertise in this and kind of knew some of the pitfalls with that. Next question. How could a school do this fast? Is there a good concertina approach? My advice here for you is to think and not to rush into do. And as I kind of think I alluded to at the start, what is the challenges that you're trying to overcome? Is it communication? Is it teaching and learning? Is it assessment? Is it people well-being? And think about that, because I think for schools and colleges that agree what the outcomes, what they're trying to achieve, it suddenly becomes a lot easier trying to put a solution in place for that. So as I said earlier, the DfE have got a platform provisioning program. So if you haven't got a learning management solution, a VLE in place, and you're looking to set up Microsoft Teams or G Suite, there is some funding to do that. So the link's on the slide. So sign up for that if that's of the interest. But I think before that, as I said, think about it. Get those platforms set up. They've got partners working behind Microsoft and Google to get those accelerated and get that to happen quickly for you. If it was me, I'd probably do that, and I'd also sign up for the demonstrator program so that you can get your platform set up, and then you've got your strategic support, guidance, bespoke support ready to go. So when it's set up, you can actually think about pedagogy and implementation and how to roll that out. Bear with me just 1 second. I think there's one more I saw. I thought, I must include. And sorry, last one, and just was to say, I think it's one thing I think we missed, is just to say that LGFL have some fantastic resources on coronavirus.lgfl.net. We've used a lot of those. Some of them we've taken and kind of tweaked for our own context, but that was another link that I thought we should probably include. So I'm just going to scroll to the bottom, just check there's no more questions that have come through. None there. So just to say thank you for coming. Thank you to Rachel and Cheryl that's in the chat, being fantastically trying to help field some of those questions. Please do reach out on Twitter. Please do sign up for the EdTech Demonstrator Programme. But more importantly than any of that, please stay safe, look after yourself and your family, and look forward to seeing you all shortly. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.